we do a quick survey of the Gospels, we find out that out of 35 recorded miracles of Jesus in the Gospels, 26 of them involve healing, and at least half of them involve some sort of physical healing. I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to faith healing. When I think of faith healers, it conjures up sham artists dancing around on the stage, kicking crutches out from under people and smacking them on the forehead to cure them of supposed debilitating neck pain. I'm a person of faith, but I'm a skeptic. So healing stories always make me nervous, which is why I am greatly relieved that this story from John's Gospel is so clearly not just a simple story about Jesus healing a blind man. But let me explain what I mean. John's Gospel is full of metaphorical language. John's Gospel has been called the most spiritual of the Gospels, whereas the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, give us history, Jesus the man. John gives us theological interpretation. From its first chapter, it's full of the language of metaphor. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. No birth story here with angels and shepherds and wise men, like in Matthew and Luke's version. The gospel itself encourages us into an ever-deepening search for meaning. The author makes the point again and again that Jesus' contemporaries did not understand the true purpose of his sayings or his actions. His mother and brothers, his disciples and friends, and in this passage most explicitly the Jewish leaders, all of them miss the point of his sayings and are dumbfounded by his behavior, which in this story is to give sight to a man who's been born blind. The first clue that this isn't just a simple story of healing is that it begins with a question that the disciples ask Jesus. The question reveals their assumption that the man's blindness was caused by sin, either his own or his parents. Neither he nor his parents is Jesus' response, challenging their belief and the predominant worldview that disease and disability were the result of sin. Then Jesus makes a paste from mud and saliva, more metaphor here, recalling the creation story of Genesis where God makes the first human, Adamah, from mud. He tells the man to go to wash in the pool of Siloam. More metaphor, we are told that the name means sent. Then the man returns, now able to see, causing great consternation among his neighbors, who take him to the Pharisees, who are upset that this healing has been performed on the Sabbath. The Pharisees interrogate the man and his parents. The requests for repeated testimony that follow point to the metaphorical blindness of the questioners, who are unable or unwilling to see what the blind man now sees, the identity of Jesus as the Son of Man. So by the end of 41 verses, the gift of physical sight to this formerly blind beggar has deepened to include spiritual and theological insight. But let's not get too far ahead. We need to return to the beginning and the question about what caused this man's blindness. It doesn't do us much good to come to this story with our 21st century lens to understand it, because, of course, we understand that what causes diseases such as epilepsy and leprosy, we can effectively even cure leprosy today. The Rotarians have been at it in countries like Brazil and India and the African continent since the 1950s. We practically eradicated it. And blindness, well, who would think to treat somebody who's blind from birth like it was their fault? We know what causes blindness, detached retinas and ocular tumors and all that, not sin. Oh my goodness, no. But the disciples' question reflects the worldview of the first century, that disability meant someone was not whole and was not able to participate in society. In Jesus' time, there were many people and many reasons that people were excluded from society. Sin and cleanliness, based on the purity laws, were primary reasons. People like widows and orphans experienced economic marginalization. Others were socially marginalized, such as tax collectors and prostitutes, and those with physical deformities and disabilities like blindness, or certain illnesses, such as mental illness or leprosy or other illnesses that caused you to be ritually unclean. To be sure, not all people with disabilities or illnesses were destitute. Many had families to take care of them. But it's noted in this story that the man who was blind from birth survived by begging. His neighbors attest to this. When he returns from the pool of Siloam, they ask, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" He was a beggar, what we might call a panhandler. People we see sitting on Bernard Street with a baseball cap or paper cup or holding a cardboard sign. Poor, hungry, anything helps. God bless. Now, even though my job here at First United is to work with the street-level community, I'm going to admit to you that I struggle with my own personal response when I see someone with a cardboard sign or walk past somebody panhandling. I've read articles with titles like Panhandling Protocol, even articles written by street people in search of wisdom about what my response should be. In one such article printed in Christianity Today, the question was posed to 3 high-profile church leaders known for their commitment to the poor. Should Christians always give money to street people who ask for it? One counsels yes. To him, it's very clear in Scripture. Freely you have received, freely give. It's not our place to judge others, to evaluate them as worthy or unworthy of our assistance. We are to love and give unconditionally. Another says, giving cash is the least helpful and most temporary solution that should only be used as a last resort. Wary of scammers, when approached, he gives his card and invites people to his mission where they can get food and shelter and also other support, because people experiencing homelessness and poverty need a caring community, he says. Absolutely not, says the third. A quick donation is cheap love. There's simply no way to tell whether a story is legitimate or what a person will spend the money on. Supporting destructive behavior is simply irresponsible, and it's not a loving act. Rather than giving money, take the person to lunch and listen to their story. People almost always need love even more than money, he says. Give your money to programs that truly liberate, empower, transform. Perhaps programs like our church's Tuesday, Thursday morning drop-in coffee hour, or In From the Cold, or the Schizophrenia Society. In the Bible story we heard today, Jesus heals the blind man, restoring him to community. Because of this, we can assume the man no longer has to beg for a living. He can have a productive life. But even more importantly, he's no longer viewed as a sinner in the eyes of his society. While in modern times, we might find it ridiculous to consider sin the cause of a person's disease or to blame someone for their disability, are there not groups today that we might admit that we view the homeless, drug addicted, people with AIDS, those on welfare, as being responsible for their own situation, whose condition we see as being the result of their own weakness or poor choices? What I notice about this story and about all the healing stories in the Gospels is that Jesus healed people with the goal of re-including them or returning them to society, those that had been shut out, excluded, marginalized. In his day, that was people like this man, blind from birth, who had no means to participate economically or socially in society, shunned because of the belief that his own sin or that of his parents had caused him to be born blind, unable because of his physical blindness to work, reduced to sitting at the roadside and begging. What were the conditions that Jesus saw and responded to in his time? Widespread poverty, poor nutrition, subsistence living, urban squalor and overcrowding, unfair taxation, overwork, indebtedness, disease, anxiety, social dislocation. Many of these same issues affect people we see on a daily basis here at First United. For me, the story raises questions for us as we consider the outreach programs we offer. How is what we are doing attempting to re-include people? What are our goals and our hopes? What beliefs or assumptions are motivating us? I've been reading a book called Toxic Charity: How Churches and Charities Hurt Those They Help and How to Reverse It. In it, author Robert Lupton describes how a benevolence business has grown as a result of people's desire to help others, and everybody is getting in on it, from school kids to major corporations to churches. Corporations realize that they can enhance their image in the public by building up employee loyalty and pride in the company by doing so. And churches, well, because it's the embodiment of Christ's love for the poor. But he says, we frequently evaluate our charity by the rewards we receive through service, rather than the benefits received by those we serve. And in some cases, we're doing more damage than good, diminishing the dignity of the poor while increasing their dependency. Mercy, Lupton writes, is a force that compels us to acts of compassion. But in time, mercy will collide with an ominous opposing force, injustice, against which mercy can seem meager. Perhaps that is why the Bible puts equal emphasis on mercy and justice. Justice takes more time, requires a lot more engagement with people and with issues than charity. Charity is the feel-good, quick-fix action that can lead us, the donor or volunteer, to feel good about ourselves, but may leave the recipient feeling disempowered and even ashamed, indebted, and further dependent. In his book, Lupton includes examples of programs that are justice rather than charity-based. He notes charity-focused programs usually have a one-way system that is about donors and recipients, whereas practices that establish authentic parity between people of unequal power promote justice. Although we give out free food and clothing here through our outreach programs, which creates a donor-recipient relationship, small things, perhaps, like the fact that we don't require proof of poverty ID, that we use first names and stress knowing names, and we try to develop relationships with those we help by offering a weekly coffee hour, are ways that we are trying to create a sense of dignity that can often be eroded for people who are receiving help. Still, there is not only the danger, but the inherent likelihood that our efforts are experienced as patronizing pity. Lupton's insights provide encouragement for some of the things that we are doing, and they'll also challenge us to consider changes that we might need to make. But we have a place to begin. Here at First, there are signs that those who are part of our Tuesday, Thursday community receive more than just charity, recognizing that they are part of us, rejoicing when they see themselves as part of our church community in whatever way that manifests itself, coming to a potluck dinner, holding a memorial in our sanctuary for a street friend who's died, calling or requesting a visit when they're in hospital. In April, the Outreach Core Ministry is planning a session to explore our vision. I think one thing this story helps us to see is that, like the disciples, the neighbors, the Pharisees, the man born blind, and his parents, we must be prepared to dismantle some of our cherished assumptions and to let God remake them in a different way. There is no simple way to finish this sermon. Some weeks we just have to allow these stories to leave church with us. So through this story and through our living this week, may God help us all to see what God is up to right here, right now. Amen.